Hello everyone, welcome back to ECE 115. This is week number 2. I have quite a bit of content to cover this week, so I'll be moving along a little bit faster than I normally do. However, remember, since this is a recording, you can always pause it and back it up if you need to rehear a little bit of information, okay? Let's get started. Our announcements. Of course, we're in week 2. I want you to give just a quick look ahead into week 3. We're going to be doing an assignment in week 3 that you'll actually need to begin on Monday. So go to week 3 and look over the week 3 assessment, which is going to be used in place of the week 3 quiz. You'll need to be familiar with this. It's basically a journal in which you're writing down one thing for each day, Monday through Friday, one item in your day in which you've either been a very good active listener or you've been a very poor active listener. So you're basically going through your conversations that you've had through the day. Maybe it's with your children, maybe it's with your boss or your spouse, and giving me one example for each day, Monday through Friday, writing it out in paragraph form so that by Friday you should have 5 paragraphs to turn in by Sunday at midnight. And also, if you look in week 3, you'll notice we have a bonus point opportunity, so check that out. Also, don't forget, if you miss the live lecture, be sure and watch this recording and submit the live lecture summary for points. All right? Our student question of the week is, can I change my externship date? And the answer is yes, under certain circumstances. For instance, maybe you're having a baby and externship is scheduled for the month that the baby is due to be born in. That may not work out so well. So sometimes we can move externship to the end of your course schedule, or maybe you're moving to a new house or to a new state. So under certain circumstances we can. If you see in your schedule that something like this might be coming up, be sure and contact me ASAP. This week we're going to look at creating developmentally appropriate classrooms. And you'll hear that term quite a bit, either developmentally appropriate classrooms or developmentally appropriate practices. So if we look at developmentally appropriate practices, we consider the individual, the child, what age they are, and also their social and cultural background. So this is what sort of encompasses the whole child, and we're going to be going over different sections of this here in a little bit. What is our rationale for developmentally appropriate practice? Bear with me through this sentence. Developmentally appropriate practices involve providing learning environments, instructional content, and pedagogical practices that are responsive to the major attributes and salient needs and interests of a given life period in order to facilitate continuing developmental progress. So I had to sort of break that down for you. What that actually is saying is developmentally appropriate practices are basically an approach to teaching grounded in the research on how children develop and how they learn. I like that definition a little bit better, easier to understand. Okay, what developmentally appropriate practice is it's not a specific curriculum. There's lots of different curriculums out there, but DAP is not a curriculum. It provides guidelines for what makes a curriculum developmentally appropriate. So keyword there, guidelines, and teachers use this set of guidelines to help them make sound decisions, for instance, in choosing what curriculum to use in the classroom. So they do tie together, but DAP is not a curriculum. Some barriers to DAP are basically, according to the NEYC, which is National Association for the Education of Young Children, the goal of early childhood education, helping each child be ready to learn when he or she enters school, has not been fully realized. So you give me some ideas in your summary. Tell me, why are some children not quite ready to learn when they enter school? You answer that in your summary. Our second question, economic goals for schooling places pressures on schools to teach more and more cognitive material to younger and younger children. So we're placing more and more emphasis on the cognitive material versus developmentally appropriate practices. And an example of that might be testing in the schools, the big one that stands out for me. You tell me if you can think of some other areas where you see children sort of pushed into this cognitive material at a younger age. Give me some examples if you can think of some. Next, sorry, I clicked on the wrong slide there. Some key aspects of the teacher's role in DAP, developmentally appropriate practices. Teachers are responsible for creating a caring community of learners, and that's part of your role. Teach to enhance development and learning, planning curriculum to achieve important goals, assessing children's development and learning, and establishing reciprocal relationships with families, which we talked about quite a bit last week. When we make decisions in our classroom in a developmentally appropriate way, we consider, as mentioned before, the age appropriateness. We're not just going to take an activity that will work for 2-year-olds and assume that it's going to be fine for every child in that classroom, because we know we're all different. Individual appropriateness. So is this okay for each individual kid in that classroom? If it's not, are there some things that we can change? And then lastly, is it socially and culturally appropriate to the kids in this classroom? So there's some content that you might teach in a bigger city that may not be as appropriate in a smaller town. For instance, I remember a pretty famous test bank that was used back in the day, where children were asked a question about making change to ride the bus. And children that lived in the country actually had no perception of what that progress was like. So it did not work with those kids as far as socially where they live. And culturally, we also look at what's their background, what family have they grown up in, what type of things do they celebrate at home, what are some of the milestones in their family. So these are all things that help us make developmentally appropriate decisions for our classroom. With child-centered instruction, which is DAP, child-centered instruction, we use small group organization. The smaller the better. We use activity centers, and we try to pick activity centers that are important to different children in the classroom, so that they're very interested in that. We use project-based learning as opposed to worksheet-based learning. Provision for student choice, because when they're able to choose their way of completing an assignment or an activity, they're more likely to do it, to get involved. Joint teacher-student planning for learning activities. So we want the children to be involved in the planning process as well. And integration of content. We don't want to cover just math or just science. We want to tie those two together whenever possible. Next, individual differences and developmental domains. How are children different? Well, here's just a few different ways they're different. Biologically, of course, male, female, genetically what they're born with. Psychologically, are they mentally ready for the classroom? Socially, their family and the environment that they live in will drastically affect the child as far as their development goes. And cultural factors, maybe cultural milestones that are reached. For instance, when a child turns 15 in the Hispanic tradition, they have a quinceanera. There's other cultures that celebrate milestones as well. So we can sort of tie those in to our classroom. And then we have nature versus nurture in our debate, which is always ongoing. Nature is how a child is born genetically, and basically what their parents' DNA determines how they will progress and develop. And then nurture is how they are raised after they are born, how much attention is paid to them, how much food they get, how much love they get in the home is nurturing. So it's always the big talk of which is more important, but the reality is that they are both probably equally important in the development of a child. Family involvement. How do we get families involved in the ECE program and in their children's educational journey? Another thing that's come up in several of our assignments recently, and in your summary, I'd like for you to give me a couple ideas. One that comes to mind is, of course, having a family day in which the family can come to the classroom and stay as much as they want. You might have families come in or individual parents come in to read during story time. It gives them some variety. So that gives you a few ideas. Keep the ball rolling and tell me, how can you get families involved in the ECE program so they feel like they're part of it? As far as establishing reciprocal relationships go, of course, it requires that the teacher is respectful, cooperates, shares responsibility in negotiations with the parent. Teachers work in collaboration with the family. A teacher isn't just making all the decisions, they want the input from the family as well. Parents welcome in the program. They need to know that they can stop by anytime if that's allowable for your center, and that they get to participate in some of these decision-making processes. Teachers acknowledge parents' choice and goals, are respectful of parents' preferences and concerns. A big example here is candy in the classroom. Some parents simply do not want their children to have candy at school, and we have to be able to respect that. A lot of centers no longer allow lots of sugary sweets in the classroom for good reasons, nutritionally and behaviorally. But if a parent has deemed this is harmful to their child, we must be respectful of that. Also, teachers and parents share knowledge of the child and continue to communicate. Very important when things are going on in that life, that we realize that children have things going on at home that are going to impact them at school. Teachers involve families for assessing and planning. Teachers link families to social services when needed. We're great resources. Teachers share information as children move from one program to another to help get them ready. And lastly, this is one of my favorite quotes. Every teacher needs to improve, not because they are not good enough, but because they can be even better. And this is Dylan William. And I love that, because as an ECE teacher, you will be a lifelong learner. Learning never stops. And once you stagnate, you're not learning anymore, and there's all this great information out there. So as a student, you're learning more each day, but as a teacher, you'll be learning as well. It's important to keep that process going. If you have any questions, guys, be sure and contact me. Email is the best method, and you can shoot an email anytime, day or night. I'll be sure and check it first thing in the morning. All right, have a great week.